Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Go ahead and like, share with your friends, and subscribe. I trudged up the polished marble stairs of my penthouse, the kind of home that could make even the most confident person feel small. Adrian Lancaster, that was me, though my name meant little beyond the weight of money and walls I'd built around myself. For years, I had trusted the wrong people, watched family members take advantage of me, and felt betrayal carve a hollow inside my chest that nothing seemed capable of filling. My life was success on the surface, but loneliness on the inside. So when I decided to hire a housekeeper, it wasn't just about keeping my mansion spotless. It was a test, a search for someone I could trust without second-guessing every gesture. I had watched too many people use proximity to my wealth as a stepping stone to manipulate or steal from me. And after years of paranoia, I devised a test to see if the new hire would be just another opportunist or someone I could actually believe in. The safe room on the top floor, my private sanctuary of valuables, was usually locked tighter than Fort Knox. But today, the door was deliberately ajar. The contents were visible, the codes for the locks scribbled carelessly on a note beside it. I had even taken the time to plant a few deliberately tempting items, small trinkets, a rare watch, and a stack of bills that would make anyone's eyes widen. I watched from the hidden surveillance panel, my heart both tense and strangely hopeful. The moment Nia Simmons stepped through the front door, I noticed her presence, the way she carried herself, careful and aware, yet unassuming. She was different from the usual applicants. Her resume hinted at experience, but her demeanor suggested humility rather than entitlement. Still, I had to see the real test, the point where desire and morality would collide. The first hour passed with routine checks, her organizing closets, dusting shelves, and handling expensive glassware with care. I sat in my office, partially hidden behind a screen, pretending to be engaged with work while actually monitoring every movement she made. And then it happened, the moment I had been both anxious and curious about. Nia approached the safe. She paused, the note with the code clearly visible, the contents tempting anyone desperate or greedy. Her eyes flicked across the room, then down at the valuables, and I held my breath. But instead of taking anything, she reached for her phone and dialed a number, presumably my secretary, who I had warned to expect her call if she found the safe open. Hi, this is Nia. I just found your boss's safe open. I wasn't sure what to do, so I thought I should call before touching anything, she said politely, voice calm and even. The line clicked with professionalism and integrity, and a part of me, long and used to such honesty, tightened in surprise. I leaned back in my chair, feeling an unfamiliar warmth spread across my chest. Most people wouldn't even hesitate. Greed had a way of pushing morals aside for immediate gain. And yet, here she was, treating someone else's property as if it were her own and respecting rules without coercion. I didn't speak, didn't intervene. I simply watched, letting the scene play out, observing her as she locked the safe with careful hands after finishing the call. It wasn't just the act, it was the thoughtfulness behind it, the consideration of consequences, and her obvious respect for someone she barely knew. As the day wore on, I listened in on her interactions, noting the care she took with every detail. She didn't treat my home as a stage for self-interest. She treated it as a place that required responsibility. Yet, beneath her composure, I sensed a tension, a weight she carried quietly. By chance, I overheard a call she made later in the afternoon, the one she thought I wouldn't hear. Her voice, low and measured, trembled slightly as she spoke about a financial struggle her family faced, a grocery store on the verge of closure, debts stacking up, the kind of pressure that could tempt anyone to make the wrong decision. $38,000, she whispered, the number sticking in my mind. I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was empathy, certainly, because I understood struggle and sacrifice. But there was also a surge of disbelief and admiration. Even knowing her family's need for money, she had resisted the temptation of my carelessly displayed wealth. The safe could have changed her immediate circumstances, erased her worry for weeks or months, and yet she chose integrity over convenience. Every movement, every choice she made in that moment spoke louder than any words could. By evening, the mansion had quieted, the city lights casting long shadows across the walls. I descended to greet her personally, though I masked my presence initially, just to see if she would falter under attention. Nia was in the kitchen, meticulously arranging silverware, humming softly as though she were alone in her own space rather than in a billionaire's fortress. The contrast between her humility and my opulence was jarring, yet refreshing in a way I hadn't realized I missed. "Good evening, Miss Simmons," I said, my voice low, deliberate. She jumped slightly, then composed herself with a polite smile. "Evening, Mr. Lancaster," she replied. There was no hesitation, no fawning or false admiration, just a professional, measured acknowledgement. I studied her face, the honest brown of her eyes meeting mine without wavering. "I saw what you did today," I began, careful not to overstate, careful not to reveal too much of my own surprise. "You didn't touch the safe." She inclined her head slightly, serene. "I thought it best to call first. I didn't want to make any decisions without guidance," she said. Her words were simple, but the conviction behind them reverberated through the room. I wanted to reach out, shake her hand, tell her she had passed a test no one else had even attempted. But I held back, letting the weight of the moment linger, letting her choice exist in its purest form. The night stretched long, and I found myself reflecting on every encounter that day. Memories of betrayal flitted across my mind. Family members who had pretended to love me while plotting behind my back, business associates who had smiled while siphoning money from me. And yet, in Nia, there was none of that deceit, none of that greed. She was an enigma, a paradox that unsettled and intrigued me simultaneously that I couldn't stop thinking about the telephone call she had made regarding her family. $38,000 could have changed the trajectory of her life immediately. I imagined her making a different choice, yielding to desperation, and I shuddered at how easily trust could be shattered by circumstance. Instead, she had acted rightly, even knowing that financial pressures loomed like a storm overhead. There was an integrity in her that I had almost forgotten existed in the world, a rarity, a jewel hidden in plain sight. I finally retired to my office, the city lights flickering across the horizon. I realized the safe had done more than test Nia's honesty. It had also tested me, my capacity to believe in someone again, my willingness to open a sliver of my guarded heart. I didn't know yet what would come next, but a sense of anticipation stirred within me. The day had revealed more than her character. It had revealed a possibility, a glimmer that perhaps the world still held people worthy of trust, even in the shadow of wealth and betrayal. And so, I waited, watched. I wondered, because for the first time in years, the walls of my mansion didn't feel like a prison. They felt like a stage where something unexpected, something genuinely human, could unfold. And Nia, quiet, honest, and resolute, was at the center of it all. The following morning, I arrived earlier than usual, anticipating Nia's arrival. The mansion felt different with her presence, less like a cold monument to wealth, and more like a place that had begun to breathe. She was already moving about, tending to the bedrooms with the same careful precision I had noticed the day before. Her attention to detail was astonishing, but it wasn't just the work, it was the care behind it. Every movement she made suggested thoughtfulness, a consciousness that reminded me of a world I'd long shut out. That I lingered in the doorway of the library, observing her from a distance. She hadn't noticed me yet, absorbed in dusting the shelves and aligning the books just so. It struck me how unusual it was to see someone who treated my estate as more than a treasure trove or a chance for personal gain. And then, I remembered the call she had made the previous evening. My curiosity and concern combined, pushing me toward confrontation, not accusatory, but exploratory, to understand who she really was beneath the professional calm. "Nia," I called softly, and she straightened immediately, the movement fluid and composed. "May I speak with you for a moment?" She nodded politely, following me into the small sitting room adjoining the main hall. Her expression remained composed, though there was a hint of nervous energy behind her eyes, a subtle tremor I had not expected. I gestured for her to sit, taking the chair opposite her, and studied her quietly. She seemed aware of my observation, yet unthreatened by it, a balance I found both remarkable and unsettling. "Yesterday," I began, "you found my safe open. You could have taken anything, and yet you didn't. You called the appropriate person instead. I need to understand. Why? What drives that kind of decision when temptation is literally in front of you?" Her gaze met mine without flinching, steady and unflinching. Mr. Lancaster, I've learned that the choices we make define us far more than the money or possessions we might gain from a single moment, she said. I have responsibilities, my family, my integrity. Taking something that isn't mine, even for temporary relief, would only create a deeper burden of guilt and dishonor. I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. I had heard variations of this before, but never with such conviction, never. From someone who could so easily have justified a different choice. There was a raw honesty in her tone that made me pause and consider the path my own life had taken. How many moments I had chosen convenience, advantage, or cunning over morality. Then, she surprised me further. And Mr. Lancaster, I recognized your name before even applying for this position, she continued. Her words were cautious, yet they carried a weight that made me lean forward, curious. Years ago, my cousin needed urgent medical care. He required a surgery that we could never afford. I discovered that a donor, anonymously, had covered the costs. That donor was you. I froze. That was not a story I had expected her to know. My acts of quiet generosity, those I had performed without recognition, were meant to stay private. I had contributed not for acclaim, but because someone needed help. And yet here she was, revealing that not only had she learned of it, but it had influenced her decision to work here to serve, not to steal. Remembered? I asked, voice barely above a whisper, a rare vulnerability creeping in. I did, she replied softly. It made me want to be here, to work honestly, because I wanted to be part of something meaningful. You helped my family when we had nothing, and I wanted to honor that by being trustworthy. That is why I didn't touch the safe. I felt a tightness in my chest, a combination of surprise, admiration, and something deeper, a recognition that trust and selflessness could exist even in a world I had assumed was dominated by greed. She had chosen integrity when it mattered. Most, not for reward or recognition, but because it aligned with her values. And beyond that, she had consciously sought me out, not for my wealth, but for the humanity she sensed in me, even through the isolation I had created around myself. Her words lingered in the air as I thought back to all the people who had walked through my doors with agendas, smiles that masked intentions, and hands that lingered too long over my possessions. Here was someone different. Someone who saw not just what I had, but who I was beneath the layers of caution, bitterness, and protective walls. And the realization hit me perhaps I had been waiting for someone like her all along. Someone capable of reminding me what it meant to trust again. There was a long silence between us, one charged with unspoken understanding. I wanted to ask her to stay, to be part of something larger, but I refrained, allowing her words and presence to fill the space on their own. She was already making an impact, not just in the household, but in the unseen corridors of my guarded heart. Eventually, I spoke again, this time with a gentler tone. Nia, it's rare to find someone who acts rightly without expectation of reward, especially when the stakes are so high. I underestimated what you might bring into this house. And perhaps I underestimated the impact of honesty in a place like this. She smiled faintly, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone secure in their principles. I believe that doing the right thing should not be motivated by expectation, Mr. Lancaster. Integrity is its own reward. Her words resonated with me, echoing long after they were spoken. I reflected on the previous day, on the moment she had called my secretary instead of taking the safe's contents, and on the moral courage it took to resist temptation even when her family's needs were pressing. She had chosen a path of selflessness and authenticity over immediate gain, reminding me that wealth and status do not define character, actions do. And yet, beneath my admiration, a part of me felt unsettled, challenged in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had spent years navigating a world of cunning, deception, and betrayal, and here was someone navigating the same world with grace, honesty, and a clear moral compass. Her courage, quiet as it was, reflected a kind of power I had never possessed. It unsettled me not because it threatened me, but because it illuminated how much I had insulated myself from real human connection. By midday, I found myself drawn to watch her work more closely, studying the subtleties of her behavior, the way she handled fragile objects, the way she adjusted lighting without being asked, the way she maintained dignity and composure even when faced with complex instructions. It was not just her efficiency that impressed me, it was the authenticity behind each choice. She embodied a rare combination of intelligence, humility, and ethical consistency that seemed almost impossible to find in someone so young. The hours slipped by unnoticed, marked only by the occasional glance through the mansion's expansive windows at the city beyond. And as evening approached, I realized that the test had done more than evaluate her. It had exposed my own longing for genuine human interaction, for someone uncorrupted by greed or selfish motives. Nia had not only passed the test, she had reshaped my perception of the possibility of trust. When she finally paused, taking a moment to sip water and catch her breath, I leaned against the doorway, letting the quiet tension between us speak volumes. "You've changed the way I see things," I said simply. "I thought I knew what trust was, but I think I've forgotten its shape until now. And I think I need to consider what it means to open myself to it again." She regarded me with steady eyes, neither arrogant nor apologetic, simply present in the moment. "Trust is not given lightly, Mr. Lancaster, nor is it earned overnight. But it can grow when we choose to act rightly, even when it's difficult." Her statement hung in the air like a quiet promise, and I felt a mix of gratitude, awe, and tentative hope. For the first time in years, the walls I had built around my life felt less like barriers and more like invitations, openings for someone extraordinary to enter and perhaps reshape the contours of my existence. That I realized, in that moment, that her decision to act with integrity had created an unexpected connection between us, one rooted not in obligation, fear, or financial interest, but in mutual recognition of values, courage, and human decency. It was rare, almost miraculous, to encounter someone whose character illuminated the path toward trust, healing, and perhaps even companionship. As the mansion settled into evening quiet, I knew that the true impact of her actions was only beginning to reveal itself. The safe had been a test, but Nia's response had become more than a mere demonstration of honesty. It was a revelation, a reminder of the power of selflessness, and a bridge to a deeper understanding of what it meant to trust, to care, and to honor another human being. And for someone like me, who had long forgotten the taste of genuine connection, that realization was nothing short of transformative. The following week, the mansion had settled into a rhythm, though the presence of Nia Simmons had shifted its atmosphere in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was subtle at first, the quiet attentiveness with which she moved from room to room, the thoughtful placement of items, the way she anticipated my needs without being asked. But over time, I realized it was more than her efficiency, it was the integrity she brought into every action, the moral weight behind choices that made even ordinary tasks feel significant. And it unsettled me, in the best possible way, because I hadn't expected honesty to be so compelling. That I had watched her for days, knowing I needed to confront the truth of what her actions had done to me, to the walls I had built around my heart. Her decision at the safe had been a test for her, but in a strange twist, it had become a test for me as well. Could I allow someone into my life without suspicion, without preemptively guarding against betrayal? Could I recognize and honor the virtue in someone else without feeling the need to exploit it for my own gratification? These questions haunted me as I found her in the library one afternoon, organizing rare books with meticulous care. "Nia," I began, my voice softer than usual. "May I speak with you for a moment?" She looked up, calm as always, and nodded. I gestured for her to follow me into my office, a space usually reserved for private contemplation and confidential meetings. Once seated, I studied her face, noting the faint tension behind her otherwise composed demeanor. She understood that this conversation wasn't about housekeeping. It was about trust, integrity, and something far deeper than either of us had yet named. "I need to acknowledge something," I said carefully, choosing each word. "Your actions with the safe, they meant more to me than you might realize. In a world where people try to take advantage at every opportunity, you chose the opposite path. And I want to reward that. I want to give you this." I slid a check across the desk, a $50,000 sum, enough to alter her circumstances if she chose to accept it. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she shook her head gently. "Mr. Lancaster, I appreciate The gesture, truly. But what I did wasn't for reward. Doing what's right doesn't require compensation. Integrity isn't something to be bought or acknowledged with money. It's its own reward. I studied her, feeling a swell of admiration that bordered on disbelief. Here was someone who could look at temptation squarely in the face and turn away. Someone whose moral compass wasn't swayed by desperation, need, or greed. That I felt a profound silence fill the room, the weight of her revelation settling around us like an unspoken bond. Her honesty, her selflessness, and the connection to a past I hadn't expected her to know created a moment of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I had lived among sycophants, opportunists, and liars, yet here was someone who embodied virtue without even a hint of performative morality. She had chosen to act rightly without coercion, without recognition, and without hesitation. It struck me then that trust was more than a simple exchange of reliability. It was a recognition of character, a willingness to open oneself to vulnerability, and a quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. And in Nia, I saw all of those qualities, reflecting back at me with a clarity that made the walls around my heart feel both exposed and alive. Nia, I said finally, my voice tinged with emotion. I don't know if I can express how much this changes things for me. You've reminded me that it's possible to encounter someone who doesn't want to exploit wealth or position, someone whose actions are guided by conscience rather than circumstance. I want you to know that your integrity doesn't go unnoticed, and I want to offer you a role beyond housekeeping, if you'd accept it. She tilted her head slightly, curiosity flickering across her face. A role beyond housekeeping? Yes, I replied. I have a foundation, the Winters Trust Foundation. I've struggled for years to find someone I could trust with it, someone who understands responsibility, empathy, and human decency. I want to offer you the opportunity to lead it, to direct it, to guide it, to shape it with your judgment. I've realized you are the only person who has reminded me what it means to be human. For a moment, she didn't speak, her gaze steady but unreadable. And then she smiled softly, a smile that was neither self-congratulatory nor hesitant, but one that conveyed comprehension, acceptance, and quiet pride. Mr. Lancaster, I am honored by your trust. I accept the responsibility, not for reward, not for recognition, but because it aligns with what I believe in. I will act with integrity, care, and dedication, as I have from the beginning. The relief, admiration, and profound respect I felt in that moment were almost overwhelming. It wasn't just the decision itself, it was the recognition that someone had chosen to enter my life without ulterior motives, someone whose actions had reminded me that trust and virtue could coexist with wealth and power. It was an awakening I hadn't anticipated, a moment that shifted my understanding of what it meant to connect with another person. In the days and weeks that followed, our working relationship transformed the mansion and the foundation. Nia's guidance, insight, and ethical perspective brought a clarity and effectiveness to the foundation that I had never managed to achieve alone. She organized initiatives, directed funding to those most in need, and implemented systems that balanced compassion with accountability. Under her leadership, the foundation grew stronger, and I found myself learning alongside her not just about philanthropy, but about humility, empathy, and trust. More importantly, the personal transformation within me became undeniable. I began to see the world differently, recognizing that not every hand extended toward me sought to manipulate or deceive. I realized that family wasn't necessarily built on blood or convenience, but on mutual respect, trust, and shared values. Nia, through her actions, had become the person I could rely on in a way that no wealth, no title, and no superficial relationships ever could point. One evening, as we reviewed a proposal for a new community project, I found myself reflecting on the journey from the open safe to this point. The trap I had set, designed to test her, had unexpectedly tested me as well. It had forced me to confront my assumptions about loyalty, honesty, and human decency. And in doing so, it had revealed a profound truth: the ability to trust and be trusted is one of the most transformative gifts we can encounter in life. Nia, I said quietly after a long pause, you've changed more than the foundation. You've changed the way I view connection, loyalty, and humanity. I am grateful beyond words. She looked at me, serene yet firm, her eyes reflecting the quiet satisfaction of someone who had acted rightly and now saw the impact of those actions. Mr. Lancaster, gratitude is not necessary. Doing the right thing, acting with integrity, and helping others, that is its own reward. But I am grateful that you recognize it, and that you are willing to open yourself to trust again. The realization settled between us, unspoken but deeply felt. The mansion, once a fortress of isolation and suspicion, now felt like a space where connection, respect, and ethical action could thrive. And I understood, finally, that the walls I had built weren't needed to protect me from the world. They were there to shield me from the possibility of being touched by someone truly remarkable. Nia had touched my life, not with force or expectation, but with quiet integrity, selflessness, and the courage to act rightly even under pressure. As the weeks turned into months, the foundation flourished under her direction, and our bond, built on mutual respect and trust, strengthened. I came to understand that wealth and power are meaningless without the integrity to wield them responsibly and the insight to recognize virtue when it stands before you. Nia had not only demonstrated those qualities, she had reminded me that family, loyalty, and trust are chosen, nurtured, and honored, rather than inherited or demanded. And so, I found a new sense of purpose, one that transcended financial success and personal isolation. The safe, the trap, and the test had led to an awakening of the heart, a recognition that honesty, courage, and trust are more valuable than any material wealth. In Nia, I had discovered not only an ally and a guide, but a reflection of the humanity I had long forgotten existed within myself. Our journey, which began with a simple test of integrity, had become a profound lesson in trust, compassion, and the transformative power of human connection. The realization hit me with full force. Wealth may be measured in numbers, but the true measure of life is in the character we cultivate and the trust we inspire. Nia Simmons had reminded me, in ways both subtle and profound, that family is not always born. It is made, nurtured, and honored through integrity, loyalty, and the courage to act rightly even when no one is watching. Moral lesson. Life often presents us with choices that test the core of our character. Integrity is rarely convenient, yet it is the foundation upon which trust and meaningful relationships are built. True wealth is not measured by money or possessions, but by the connections we cultivate and the honesty with which we live. When we act selflessly, honor our principles, and recognize the goodness in others, we create a world that reflects the best of humanity. Family, love, and loyalty are not dictated by blood alone. They are forged in moments of trust, courage, and shared values. By choosing integrity over temptation, kindness over convenience, and trust over suspicion, we not only elevate ourselves, but also inspire those around us to embrace their highest potential. In the end, it is the decisions we make in the quiet, unobserved moments that define the life we lead and the legacy we leave behind. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment your thoughts on trust, integrity, and the power of human connection.